powerful speech from our local member of provincial parliament, Christina Midas. Give her a big round of applause. Thank you very much. She has been relentlessly fighting for her people, all the while raising 3 small children, all of whom have been born since she was elected only 4 years ago. You can imagine this has been a very busy term in office for her. So it is an incredible honor for me to stand with someone of such profound conviction, who's demonstrated her willingness to pay a political price, to do the right thing, and to stand up for the freedom of all people. Thank you so much for Christina for being part of my team. When I called Christina and asked for her support in the leadership race, she said, I have an important question for you. Do you believe in free speech? Yes. I said yes. She said, how would you like to give one? And that's how I ended up here today, giving this entirely free speech with all of you. But it is an appropriate way to start the remarks because, you know, whether you've been in this country for 300 days or your ancestors have been here since 300 years ago, we all came to Canada for the same reason, right? People wanted to leave places where governments ran their lives, told them what to do, and took away the fruits of their labors. They wanted the chance to carve a little piece of paradise out of that big, cold patch of land we call Canada. They came here not for free stuff, but for freedom, right? And when my great-grandfather went from France to Saskatchewan about 100 years ago, Wilfrid Laurier was Prime Minister. And they asked him, what's Canada's nationality? If he'd been a European leader, he would have defined our nationality based on the ethnicity of the people. In Scotland, it was Scottish, England, English, France, French, etc. But in Canada, we were already too mixed up to define ourselves on the basis of any nationality. We had the First Nations, the Scots, the Irish, the English, even Asian populations were starting to arrive. We've never been an ethnic nation here in Canada. So instead, he said, Canada is free and freedom is its nationality. And so it is today. But lately, Canada has not felt so free, has it? No. People feel like they're losing control of their lives. Whether it's the 14-year-old girl suffering depression after 2 years separated from sporting and social activities. Whether it's the single mother who doesn't know how she's going to pay the bills now that she's lost her job because of the crime of making her own personal medical decision. Whether it's the soldier who's being dishonorably discharged after courageously and valiantly defending our country because he wouldn't accept the government telling him to take a vaccine against his will. Whether it is the hard-working trucker who helped keep us all alive throughout the pandemic, right? Services across the border safely and without a vaccine, and was called a hero until suddenly the Prime Minister brought in a mandate, just as the rest of the world was lifting them, on the very people who are least likely to spread a virus because they're alone in a truck all day, right? That is not medical science, it is political science, and that is why I will fight tooth and nail to put an end to all of these mandates once and for all. The medical freedoms that we have lost. It is our economic freedoms. You might be the senior who's forced to choose between eating and heating because of the cost of inflation. You might be the single mom who's skipping meals now so that your kids don't have to because you're one of the 4 and 5 families who cut back on your diet because you can't afford groceries anymore. You might be the Northern Ontario miners working 60 hours a week but can't afford the $2 a liter diesel to gas up your truck and drive and see your dying parents in Thunder Bay for one last time before they go. Or you might be the 32-year-old still living in your parents' basements because you can't afford the $1 million it costs for the average home. We have any of those in the crowd today? Wow. Because I don't want, look at this everybody. What's your name?
Graham.
Graham. How old are you? 4. I see that you're planning ahead. It says here, Pierre 4 p.m. because I don't want to live in my dad's basement when I'm 30. So this young lad obviously has some foresight, right? By the way, what's wrong with your dad's basement? There's no good toys down there? No! There used to be what down there?
Lego.
There used to be Lego. What happened to the Lego? Dad, come on, get him some Lego. It's upstairs now. You know, it's hard times. We can't even afford Lego these days. But anyway, listen, we want this young guy and today's young people to have the chance to move out and start their own lives. I was in BC the other day and I said, you know, if you are 32 and you're living in your mom's basement, how do you even bring home a date? And there's a lady in the crowd who said, very carefully. Yeah, somebody just shut out through the side window. But seriously, can you imagine what it does to a young person's psychological security when they can't own the roof over their head? That means they can't build collateral or credit history. The #1 source of retirement savings in Canada is our homes. If you can't buy one, you can't secure your own future. No wonder we have such an epidemic of mental health problems. People are deeply anxious about their futures. And in part, it's because inflation is now running at 3 times wage growth. People can't get ahead. In fact, they're falling further behind. Many of them are just hanging on by a thread. Now, what's causing it? Well, the answer is that the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. Inflationary deficits send more dollars bidding up the price of fewer goods. Inflationary taxes make it more expensive to produce those same goods. The more government spends, the more people pay. It's just inflation, right? He has literally doubled our national debt in 7 years. He has added more debt than all the previous Canadian prime ministers combined. Now, all of that money had to come from somewhere, so he taxed as much as he could get, and then when he ran out of that, he borrowed even more. And then when he ran out of money to borrow, he had the central bank print the cash, increasing our money supply by $400 billion in just the last 2 years. 1 in every $5 in circulation today was created since 2020. You can believe it. And those dollars, of course, go out and bid up the price of the things you buy. If you have $10 in an economy and 10 loaves of bread, well, it's $1 for each loaf of bread. And if you double the number of dollars to 20, well, then it becomes $2 per loaf of bread, right? That's basic math. More dollars bidding on the same goods means a higher price. Not bad for everybody, though. If you're a millionaire mansion owner, you've just got a lot richer sitting on your big fat assets, right? But if you're a working class person living on your wages, you've had a very real wage cut. Does anybody have a quarter? I promise I'll give it back. I'm not going to. I just need to see it for a second. This guy forgot his wallet. All right, everyone's broke. Just need to see it for a quick second. He's got a quarter over here. All right, let's have a look at this quarter. Does everybody know why we have these ridges on the edges of the quarter? Because back in the era of Henry VIII, he used to shave off the edges of the British pound so that he could use the silver to melt it down and create even more coins. And the result was that he increased the number of coins in circulation by 80%. And what happened then at that time in England? The prices went up by 80%. So what happened after he was gone is they brought in a law in England that they'd always have rigid edges like this, and if anyone was caught clipping or shaving the edges, they could go to jail. And in our criminal code today, it is actually still a crime to clip off the edges of coins. But what do governments do when they cause inflation? They cut off the edge of your coin. Inflation is 6.7% this year, meaning 6.7% of your loonie has been clipped off. It buys that much less. It becomes less and less valuable. I mean, I'm probably getting poorer just holding this devaluing quarter, so I better get back to you quickly before it's worth nothing. But the reality is that our governments are effectively stealing from us through inflation by printing all this cash. So what are we going to do about it? One, we're going to stop the deficits that have necessitated all of the money printing in the first place. And here's how. We're going to cancel Trudeau's $100 billion new slush fund, extra unnecessary spending that's stacked on top of all of the spending we were doing before. We do not need bigger government. We need more results for the money that we already spend. Two, he's got this multi-billion-dollar infrastructure bank. We need infrastructure. We don't need a bank. All that bank is going to do is pay bonuses to the executives who have so far not completed a single project with the money and have put in place loan guarantees to protect large corporations that fail to deliver their projects on time and on budget. If they deliver the project, they should make a profit. But if they don't, they should be the ones to take the loss, not taxpayers. I'm going to get rid of the multi-billion-dollar infrastructure bank. And I just found another $1 billion of savings. We're going to defund the CBC. Excellent. That's going to be the funnest $1 billion we're ever going to save. And you know what? We're going to start to manage our money the way you manage your household budget. When you increase spending in one area, you reduce it somewhere else. You have to find the money within your budget. It's either or, not and. You know, the great economist Thomas Sowell said that the first law of economics is scarcity. There's always more demand for stuff than there is stuff to have. The first law of politics is to ignore the first law of economics, right? Politicians are the only creature in the universe that live without scarcity by simply pushing it off onto the population, by taxing it, lowering it, or printing money to cause inflation. So how are we going to stop that? We're going to bring in the pay-as-you-go law. Here's how it works. For every new dollar of spending the government brings in, they'll have to find a dollar of savings to pay for it. Just like you do in your household. They did this in the United States during the 1990s when they were almost broke. They balanced their budget, paid off $400 billion, and when that law lapsed because Congress wouldn't renew it, well, what happened? They went right back into deficit, proving that you need to impose the same scarcity on politicians that they impose on everyone else. Our Canadian people have been pinching their pennies for long enough. It's time for politicians to start pinching their pennies. Stop the Bank of Canada from enabling government spending initiatives. The bank exists for one reason, to keep stable prices. Low inflation is supposed to be their mandate. They target 2%, it's now 6.7%, more than triple what they're supposed to be hitting. And that's because they forgot their job. They think it's to bankroll Justin Trudeau and become his personal ATM. I'm going to reinstate the traditional mandate of the Bank of Canada to keep inflation low, to protect our dollar, and I'm going to put the Auditor General in charge of investigating whether they uphold that. And now they have this idea that they want to bring in a central bank digital currency, right? Which of course would mean we already have digital money in our bank accounts. We have electronic transfers and credit card payments that are already digital in nature. So what would this do that we don't already have? Well, it would mean that we'd have personal bank accounts with the government. Now, who trusts the government to manage our personal bank accounts? You saw what they did to their political opponents just over a month ago with the Emergency Act, raiding people's bank accounts. freezing them out of their money so that they couldn't even pay their mortgages. Imagine how they could attack our civil rights if they controlled our bank accounts. Imagine how they could buy votes by creating new cash and favoring certain voters or punishing certain industries like energy in order to achieve their political objectives. This is nothing more than a government takeover to restrict our economic and financial liberties. I will stop it. I will ban a central bank inflationary taxes that have been driving up the cost of living for our people. You know, politicians like Justin Trudeau, Patrick Brown, and Jean Charest have all supported a carbon tax, even though it's been demonstrated to do absolutely nothing for our environment while driving up the cost of living on our working class and driving jobs out of our country to more polluting jurisdictions. This is not about fighting for the environment, this is about raising revenue for the government, and I will put an end to it by axing the Liberal carbon tax altogether. Grow more food and generate more Canadian energy right here in this country. That means get rid of the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers that are standing in the way of new home construction. You know, we have the fewest houses per capita in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. And we have the smallest population for which to supply homes. Well, why is it we don't have enough of them? The answer is the local government gatekeepers block construction in order to inflate the asset values of people who already own. And this shuts out a whole generation of homeowners. You know, the cost of government regulation baked into every single house in Toronto is about $250,000. All of that gets passed on to the home buyer. In Vancouver, it's $644,000. It can take 6 or 7 years from the time a builder applies until the time they get their permit. It takes longer to get the permit to build than it does to build the house. Government costs more often than labor and material combined. And that is why we have a whole generation of young people who can't find a place to live. We need to get the gatekeepers out of the way. Now, most of them are municipal in nature, but the federal government does supply municipalities with infrastructure money. Every time I meet with a big city mayor, the whole meeting could take 2 seconds, because the request is always the same. Give me money, is all they ever say. They want more federal money to fund their spending. Well, they're not going to get money for nothing anymore. They're going to have to produce results. So here's how it's going to work for big cities with populations over 500,000 and overpriced real estate that is median price is 5 times the median household income. Places like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa. They will have to remove the regulatory gatekeepers and allow a 15% per year increase in the number of homes completed, or I will claw back some of their federal infrastructure money. There will be a Pierre as well. Right now, Trudeau's put in place this big housing plan, $10 billion. I believe we can do it for half the price and save the money. We're going to take $5 billion, and we're going to turn it into a pay-for-performance model. If you're a businessman, you get paid when you deliver the product. So the municipalities want money for infrastructure related to housing. They will get $10,000 for each extra unit of housing that gets completed. They get the job done, they get the money, get the gatekeepers out of the way, get our young people into the homes. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to sell off 15% of Canada's 37,000 underutilized federal buildings. These buildings were underutilized before the pandemic, and many of them are outright empty right now. Stats Canada has gone to a full work-from-home model, and yet these buildings sit there empty while young people can't find a place to live. I'm going to sell off 15% of them, convert them into affordable housing, use the proceeds of sale to pay off parts of the deficit. And guess what? Right in downtown Toronto, we'll have lots of space for new housing when we sell off the CBC's headquarters. Money and start building houses. We've got to get the gatekeepers out of the way, though, of our newcomers who are here to earn paychecks. How many of you don't have a family doctor? Anybody in this room? People in our country don't have family doctors, even though we have tens of thousands of brilliant immigrants who come here who have practiced medicine in equally advanced countries around the world, but then can't get a license to practice here because of provincial government gatekeepers. It's true in engineering, in architecture, and in many of the trades as well. The federal government gives provinces money for immigration. I want that money to get results. Whenever a newcomer arrives here with a professional or a trades designation, they should have the right, and they will have the right when I'm Prime Minister, to get an answer within 60 days of applying to work in their field. If they cannot qualify, then I will back up 30,000 small study loans so that they can take the time off work, get licensed. We can have more doctors, more engineers, more plumbers, more electricians, more paychecks, and a stronger economy for all of us. We're going to get rid of the gatekeepers that stand in the way of the production of clean, green Canadian energy. You know we're importing 130,000 barrels of overseas oil to Canada every single day, even though we have the third largest supply of petroleum on planet Earth. Well, that's because Justin Trudeau has attacked our energy sector with regulations that prevent us from building pipelines and digging new mines. My government will do precisely the opposite. We will repeal the No New Pipelines Bill C-69. We will replace it with a policy that approves projects quickly, consults with our First Nations, and gets things done so that we can build Canadian pipelines to Canadian consumers, to deliver Canadian oil, and generate Canadian paychecks once and for all. To increase their production by 400,000 barrels a day. That's more than enough to replace the 130,000 we're bringing overseas. So I will approve Newfoundland's increased production, replace the overseas oil, and within 5 years we will ban dictator oil from Canada altogether. And it's not just oil, it's actually about 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right under our feet. Gas that can be used to shut down coal fire plants in Asia. BC is the closest point in North America to Asia. And of course, Newfoundland is the closest point in North America to Europe. All you need to do is put in place a liquefaction facility. You know how you turn gas into a liquid so it can fit on a ship and go overseas? You know how you do it? Cool it down. What do we have lots of in Canada? Cold weather. That's right, you said bloody cold weather. That's true. That's true. You know we got so cold last winter, Justin Trudeau was seen with his hands in his own pockets? So the Newfoundlanders have a plan to pipe the gas from their offshore oil fields to the coast, cool it down to minus 161 degrees Celsius so it can be put on a transport ship, sent off to Europe to supply Europeans with our clean, green, ethical natural gas to break their dependence on Putin so that we can bring that money home to Canada. Instead of attacking our energy sector, we're going to ban municipalities from pouring the disgusting practice of pouring raw sewage in our waters, which is what they're allowed to do right now, and they have done trillions of cubic feet of raw, untreated sewage that they've been dumping into our waters, all at the same time as they oppose the lawful and well-regulated production of our energy. We're going to have a policy that actually protects the environment while generating paychecks for our people at the same time. And then we're going to go after the speech gatekeepers. You know, the people who want to control what you see and say on the internet. The woke folk. Are there any woke folk in the room today? No wokesters here. We don't get many wokesters out to my events. I can't imagine why. You know the woke folk. They want to control everything you say. They want to divide us along every possible line. On race, on gender, on vaccine status. And the Prime Minister is the worst offender of all. This from the guy who has such an ugly, racist past of his own. He feels that he can go around accusing other people of racism. You know what's consistent between his his earlier life as a young racist and his present life as someone who plays racial politics. All of his adult life, he has divided people by race. He has done this for a deliberate purpose. It's not an accident. It's the oldest strategy in the book, divide and conquer. He believes that if you are afraid of your neighbor, if you think that your trucker is a danger to you, if you're fighting with your coworker, then you'll turn to him to protect you from your fellow citizens. You know, he and his liberal media friends, they almost want to make us afraid of our fellow citizens, because there and then they can give themselves the control over our lives under the false pretext of protecting us from our fellow Canadians. Ladies and gentlemen, under my leadership, we will put an end to divide and conquer, and instead we will honor every Canadian, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, vaccine status. We will unite for freedom. Here's the difference between control and freedom. Control is a zero-sum game. If one person gets more control, others have to have less control. Freedom is exactly the opposite. If your neighbor gets more freedom, you don't get less. You get more freedom too, right? If a Muslim gets more religious freedom, then the Christian will have more religious freedom. If your local small businessman gets freedom from excessive red tape, you'll probably get the freedom to buy more affordable goods from his store. And maybe your teenager will have the freedom to have a job working at that store. If the immigrant gets the freedom to work in the profession for which he was trained, you'll have the freedom to have a doctor when you're sick. You see, freedom supports more freedom. That's why free countries are far more harmonious, why people unite when they're experiencing all the blessings of freedom. It's why people always flood to free countries. Nobody escapes a free country to go live in North Korea or Iran, right? You don't see people getting on paddle boats from the southern United States to go to Cuba. Nobody flees towards control and tyranny. They always flee towards freedom, because freedom is written on every human heart. It is an aspiration that is without race or color. It is something that every single person pursues, and it is what we as Canadians have as our birthright. That is why I'm running for office, my friends. There's a why is the most important question. The two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why you were born. So why am I running for Prime Minister? I'm running for Prime Minister to give you back control of your life by making Canada the freest nation on earth. I can't do it without you. I cannot do it without you. You need to be a member to vote for me in the leadership race, because if I don't become leader, I can't run against Justin Trudeau. So do exactly the thing he doesn't want you to do. Buy that membership. Vote for me to become your leader. Freedom has never come from the top down, always from the bottom up. The reason the House of Commons is green is because the first commoners met in the field where they forced King John to sign the Great Charter, the Magna Carta, that gave us the freedom we have today. Freedom from taxation without representation, freedom from arrest without charge, freedom to have jury trials, freedom of all kinds originated from the bottom and has always been imposed upwards. And that's why I need you to join with me to be part of this effort to defend our freedom. It is a contract between the dead, the living, and the yet to be born. It is the duty of every living generation to defend that 800-year tradition of freedom that we inherited here in this country. It might be 800 years old, but it is only one generation deep, and it is the duty of these generations in this room to rise up and defend it. In the words of the great Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, who said, "I am a Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, free to worship God in my own way, free to choose those who shall govern my country." It is this heritage of freedom that I pledge to uphold and protect for all of mankind. Thank you very much.